All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining me. So this all seems to be working now. That's cool. Happy Saturday to everyone. Thank you very much, Sir Andrew Waltz. I'm working on one of those things where I can put messages up on the screen right about here, or I guess probably better just put them right here and so you have a better view of everything else. But if I can avoid kicking the light, I've got to find the right third-party streaming thing to do that. I've spent about 5 hours trying to get one service to do that, and it was none of the instructions matched their reality. So I also don't want a whole bunch of different services having access to my account. Anyway, let's get started. Andrew Waltz. Hey, Lyle. Hey, Andrew. If you were planning a black-faced Princeton Reverb build, what changes would you make from the original design? I would say, first of all, are you trying to make a guitar amp or a bass/keyboard/anything else amp? Because Fender was designing those things to be an amplifier. It wasn't a guitar amplifier. He also sold basses. He also sold keyboards, the Rhodes. So every amp that Fender designed was flat down to like 2 to 5 hertz in the audio path. You know, the output transformer and speakers would limit that. As a result, they have a lot of low-end buildup. So when you go in there and say, okay, 100K plate, X voltage, 12x7 has a move factor of blah, 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 1.5K, and then it's got a 25 microfarad across it. Whoa, that's flat down to like 2 hertz. What happens if I change that to like a 4.7 microfarad cap for the cathode bypass? Okay, now it's flat down to about 35 hertz. That's much better. That gets a lot of the mud out. You can just do that throughout the entire stages. So in general, you can decrease the size of cathode bypass caps. You can decrease the size of coupling caps, like in the phase inverter output on a Princeton has 100 nanofarad output caps in the phase inverter, and that's flat down with 220K resistors down to like 7 hertz or so. I don't have the math in front of me. This is from memory. If you change those to 10s, you're going to be flat down to about 70 hertz. Okay, it's not quite right for most people. They want a little bit more than that. Well, let's go to 15 or 22. You're going to be down to like 40 hertz. So you're still going to have plenty of low end for the guitar. The sludge isn't going to get amplified, and any really low frequency stuff coming from the tremolo will get filtered out then. You won't hear that. That's one of the tricks I did on this Ampeg Reverber Rocket. You can see yesterday's video on that. That's what I was just playing through, by the way. You'll get to hear it for real with a real mic later. The other thing about Princeton's in general is that they have all the preamp on one node, and they have an unused node in the filter supply that you can repurpose to give the phase inverter a separate higher B+ node. And you can look that up, and I've shown that in videos. That gives a lot more headroom to the amp. I think that was something that Leo and the gang did. He didn't do all this himself to make the Princeton really good, but not quite as good as the Deluxe Reverb. So if you had a Princeton, you played your buddy's Deluxe Reverb, you'd want the Deluxe Reverb. Similarly to how they crippled the Champ. So if you had a Champ, you'd want the Princeton. If you have the Deluxe Reverb, you'd want the Super Reverb or the Twin. I've discussed this in other videos, but yeah, those are the big overviews. Let's see here. Let me scroll back up. Let's see. Maybe I need to hook up. Let me get my wireless mouse hooked up for this. Where'd that thing go? Aha. All right. Let's see. AC, that's Andy. Benfica is playing for the title. Why? I don't know what that means, but I hope whatever the result is that is the one you're looking for. Peaceful Warrior, thanks, man. That's nice. Clyde, my live rig back in the day, I had quite a few. I started off with a Stage 85, which had built-in chorus and reverb and distortion, and I thought I was as a god. Then a buddy of mine, Rob Hull, who was still in the Navy then, I thought he was older and wiser. He's like 3 to 5 years older than I am. So I was a kid, and he was an accomplished man. He recommended that I get this old amp that he had just worked on. It was a 64 Deluxe reverb, and it sounded great. And I got that, and I had a DOD chorus, and I got a rat pedal. And this is like 1987, 88. And I thought I was king of the world. And then I started gigging, and I could not hear the Deluxe reverb on any of the stages we were playing because we did not have stages with monitors, et cetera, et cetera. And I did not know about extension cabs or any of that. So like the utter idiot asshole that a 17, 18-year-old can be, and this is long before the internet where someone can say, wait. I traded that 64 Deluxe reverb for a JC120. And man, could I hear myself on stage, and it sounded harsh. And I started buying Digitech stuff. I had a floorboard multi-effects thing from Digitech. I don't remember what model it was, and I could sound kind of like Queensryche, chorus and all kinds of effects. And I had a Zoom digital overdrive pedal, digital distortion. I don't remember what model it was. It sounded pretty good, actually. It could really make you sound like Prince. It just really good at that. I mean, I couldn't play like Prince, let alone dance and carry the outfits, but that sound was great. And after that, I got a PV Classic 50 and a Mesa. I had two Mesa 2x12s, and that was a good sounding rig. And I think I used the Zoom and the Rat with the Classic 50. And got sick of all that. Really tired of that after a while. The next amp I got was a Marshall Bluesbreaker, and I saw all these mods you could do to it. So I started doing them, and I went way crazy. Again, early days of the internet. So I was using like Ryka ohm resistors, like resistors that were $3 each, which may or may not make a difference in someone's hi-fi setup. Made no difference in a JTM45, but that amp sounded great. And then came kids, and I stopped gigging, and I had held on to the Marshall as long as I could. And I actually had a Vox Valvetronics 120 for about 15 years, which was really pleasant to use. And I had all kinds of rack stuff. I had pods, I had Eventides, all this stuff. And I started working on other people's amps and playing amps all the time. And I did my own stuff. Started to gather dust and wasn't really giving me the sound that I was getting from the amps I was working on as I learned more and more. So that's the story of my own amplifiers. I actually have no amplifier of my own and have not for many years now because I'm always surrounded by amps to play. Like, okay, today's this 62 Ampeg. Tomorrow I got to go through this 64 AC10. The tubes just arrived to finish up. I don't even remember which Marshall it is that I've got here waiting for tubes, and I've got another Vox Cambridge reverb over there to play through, and a Fender Stage 12, and I've got a horde of AC30s here. I've got to finish this super reverb here Monday or Tuesday. So, I don't actually need an amplifier because I'm not playing out. I have spent a lot of time answering that. Sorry, I'll try to get to everyone else's questions. That was, you made the mistake of asking me about myself. Aloha, Victor. Nervous Ned. No, I am not a therapist, but if you know a good one, I could probably use one. Clyde Broadway. Anyone have songs that give you chills? Mine is the Rain Song. Yeah, the Rain Song and 10 Years Gone are probably tops in that category for Zeppelin for me. And just on a lot of material. Bonzo's swagger, his swagger. That's a really good world to visit for 3 to 4 minutes. That's not the same thing as chills, but as to other things that can give you chills, I'm going to let other people answer because I'm not the only person whose opinions matter here. I like this little group of people that get together every couple weeks and do this, and I may be the ringleader, but the show's not about me, so I enjoy seeing you guys talk to each other. Hey, Randy. Hey, Adept. Hey, 75. Now, 75 YBA, you've told me your name, and I've spaced it because that was one of Brad's chats a couple weeks back. So remind me, please. But wait, no volume? Is that what you're saying? I'm seeing the volume. I can't listen because I've got a delay that'll set up a feedback loop, but it seems to be going out to everyone. Your amp was off. Okay, good. Scared me there for a minute because I was just talking, and I'm like, no one heard that. Oh, shit. Hey, Nola. You got a Marshall to finish up this week, and all your amps will be ready for you to pick up, and we'll talk. Jesse Moody says, in terms of solid-state amplifiers, do I have any opinion on Quilter amps? I have not used one. I have not had one in. I know that people love them. I expect that as long as you understand their purpose and you're okay with the purchase maybe only lasting 5 years or so, because with solid state these days, there's usually a period where they work, and then it can cost more to repair them than to replace them. It's like an iPhone. So if you get 3 to 5 years out of it, and you can figure out that's what that cost me per month. If that math works for you and it does what you need it to do, that's great. A lot of guys carry them, I know, as backups in case their main rig goes down, which case they can literally save your ass. So there's nothing to criticize there. The ones I have heard recordings of, they sound okay. I've not heard one that said, "Damn, I need one of them's." Yeah, I got the O-scope hooked back up, and I've got the current limiter bulb there in the background just to be a little spot of color. But if I were to slam some hard chords on the Ampeg, you'd see it get brighter. Just trying to do little things to make it look prettier. I can't do anything about this, but the rest of it's looking kind of nice. Greetings for Scotland. Hey, Martin, I won't do that too much. Sorry. Making sure I don't scroll too fast. Yeah. Randy Steffs just told Jesse pretty much the same thing I was saying about quilters. Jatuka says, I borrowed the oscilloscope from my wife. No. She... gadgets like this are totally my world. Let's see. Hey, Tim Connors. I'm doing great. Hope you are too. Let's see here. It's scrolling weird. Hey, Richard. Richard Nagamitsu says, do the horde of AC30s have common issues to a large degree? No. One's a old limited edition that is getting the same fixes as the previous limited edition did, where I take out the useless reverb and change the filtering to be more JMI specific. Just makes the amp breathe like a real AC30. It is one of the last models made in the UK. It is kind of the big brother to the TBX series, and while it does not have the problems the TBX series has, it was still wildly over-filtered, and they did a truly stupid reverb circuit. You can see the previous one where I did that. One of the other AC30s here is a custom classic where the plastic jacks broke. That happens. I'm going to be replacing them with some with metal ferrules. You'll see that this coming week. And I've got a hand-wired that's just in for upgrades to make it sound like an AC30. Yeah, Adept, the Valvetronics, none of the effects were stellar. The modeling was pretty good. It did certain models better than other. And it didn't have a tube preamp, but it used two 12AX7s in each power section. So you had some of the tube behavior, even though the output section after those two 12AX7s was purely a solid state. And the preamp stuff was all, I don't know, I've never looked at it closely. I don't know whether the preamp stuff was digital or analog op amps and stuff. It never needed any work other than some pots cleaning towards the end of its life. And I sold it to a kid for like $100, and I ran into him not long ago, and he's still using it. So, thanks. The sounds great on the mic or on the guitar, though. The guitar goes through the mic. I've been playing around with this program, and I've added a compressor and a limiter, so it should be pretty consistent as I move around. And then if I go in for the radio announcer voice, it shouldn't blow things out. Jammin' in the Jammies says, 65 Showman, local amp tech cleaned up the sockets and pots, changed filter caps and bias supply. Sounds great clean, but once it starts to break up, there's this weird short distortion on the attack. A lot of times, not every time, and I can't fully diagnose your amp without having it here, that's a sign of a not great solder joint. On any 60s Fender, the first thing I would check would be all the horizontally mounted resistors. That's the slope resistors, that's the resistor going to the plate that feeds the LFO, and crucially, it's the 100 ohm in your model resistor from the phase inverter tail to ground. And there could be others, but those are the ones which are most likely to have bad solder joints, and not fully bad solder joints, but the lead will have been pulled over time by that board flexing, and the lead will just slightly pull out of that solder joint. It'll still be resting in place. So it's making contact, pardon me, until you play really loud, and then the whole amp vibrates, and when the amp vibrates, you get that on that transient. That's the first thing I would check. That's the most likely. Beyond that, bring it back to your tech and say, hey, everything sounds great except it's doing this one thing. Can you find that? Sometimes amps work fine for us on the bench, and they work fine. You put it in the cab and it sounds great, but we're not gigging with it. And sometimes everything's fine, then you hit a pothole on the way to the gig or whatever. Or sometimes it's happened just vibrations between my bench and the client picking it up. So, yeah, no one is perfect. None of us are perfect. I make mistakes. All that we can do is say, yep, I missed that. Let me fix that for you. And then life goes on. So take it to the tech and give them another shot. I don't know anyone who does this who's like, I'm going to screw these guys over. That's what I'm going to do. I could have gone and got my real estate license and made a lot more money, but no, I'm going to stay here in this really strange niche just to screw with people. Harmonics and double stops make it jump out. That could be a lot of things, but again, I'd have to have it in front of me. So, Dave Case, hey Lyle, hey Dave, what do you think the best 12-inch speaker for Princeton Reverb would be? All right, best is one of those things that we all need to stop using. In anything, especially online, if you Google best mop, best dishwash rag, best watch, you're going to get a million suggestions. Most of them are by bots with that awful thing where the computer does narration over existing shots of stuff, and they customize videos just for specific topics, even though no one associated has any knowledge of it. AI is going to be making this worse and worse, by the way. So best is not a useful criteria, because there is no such thing as best. There is best for you. There is most suitable for certain aspects. All that said, for someone who wants the classic Fender sound, I would say you'd be hard-pressed to do better than a WGS ET10 or G10C or a Celestion G10 Blue, the Alnico Blue, the 10-inch. Those are going to be three really good sounding speakers. The first two are going to be more traditional. The G10C is going to be the most traditional. Now, all that said, the speaker that actually came in old Princetons, the Oxfords, don't sound as good as any of those three. Any of these three would give you something more similar to a 12-watt twin reverb sound with more of a mid-range scoop. The 10-inch Oxfords are a little bit honking, so if you really want that, maybe the Imminence Little Buddy would be a really good choice. It's going to have that mid-range kind of thickness that the old Oxfords do. I'm not a huge fan of those old Oxfords. I know that's blasphemy for some, but I always felt that the Princeton was limited intentionally by Fender to make you want the next one up, as I've said. I have not had a look at the Ampeg GVT series, but in time, I imagine I will. I have not come across any stage right monoprice amps. If someone brought one in, I would hand it back to them and say it's not worth repairing. I'm sorry, I charge $80 an hour. The average repair is 2 hours minimum, unless I take pity on someone. Most repairs go 2 to 3 hours. So what's a $200 amp? You know, you get what you pay for, and some things, when you say, I'm going to buy something very, very inexpensive, you're like, well, I have signed myself up to be a landfill contributor. Hey, Colby Jack, thanks very much for that. Appreciate that. Yeah, I have gone to Payne's, and I have used the gift card twice, and I still have a balance, and I really appreciate it. Payne's is a fantastic barbecue, but it's really a specialty kind of barbecue. It's really tangy with a mustard slaw, and I don't want it all the time. When I want barbecue, 80% of the time I want more traditional barbecue. Payne's is kind of a challenge, but when I want Payne's, I really want Payne's. So I really appreciate that. Thank you very much, man. That's very generous of you. Thank you, Dave. I'm pleased with the camera. It's not just the camera, it's a lot of lights. It's crazy how hard I have to work to make it look like I don't have a bunch of fancy lights here. But I've got a great big 36-inch parabolic soft dome cob light there for my key. And I've got a big 3x4 foam core reflector board hung up here to give me fill. And then I've got a light mounted over there, which is just directed at stuff on the bench. I've got a light up there. You can see the stand just over my left ear. This one, I'm always forgetting right, left here on the screen. That's just to give me a backlight for the edge of my hair and the edge of my shirt. And then I've got a light over there at an angle, so it picks up the red curtains and puts that gradient there on the wall. And then I've got that bulb. And then I've got the dancing O-scope. So much to look so casual, but it really does help when I'm doing the videos of the amplifiers, because I can really show everything very clearly. And that's the main focus, is getting all this so that when I do the amp videos, you can see everything in great detail. And then maybe 2-3 times a month, it'd be my mug, just happen to have all this stuff. Ooh, Sean McGarvey asked a tough question. What's my take on the very early Vox Thomas solid state? The Thomas Working solid state Voxes really were interesting sounding amps. However, the transistors that they used in those are just the same transistors, often germanium transistors, And then they would go and measure each of them individually for gain. And if they fell in a certain range, they get painted yellow. If they fell in a certain range of gain, they'd be painted blue or red, and then used in different parts of the amp. And so there's not any real direct drop-in non-germanium replacement for those. And germanium transistors are hard to find. When you do find them, they're very expensive. And say I need to have 18 to do a Thomas organ Vox. I may have to buy 100 and sort that out to find 40 that are test good at all. And then I got to go through all those and say, all right, well, of these 40, these are in the original yellow range. These are in the original red range. This one's almost to what the old blue was. I'm going to have to go get some more if you really want me to get it right. It's an awful lot of money to keep something going from 1967 that was using a technology that was abandoned pretty much as silicone came on the market. So that was a very narrow window of technology that they did that. It's like if NASA was going back to the moon and they wanted to use exactly the same parts they used in 1968, 69, it would cost 10 times more to do it today. And you would get to the moon 10 times slower. I think the solid state Voxes had their time, and that time has passed unless you have really, really deep pockets. Mad Max asks a very important question that he thinks is boring. Sorry. Do you know of any good volume pots for the guitar that are higher friction and don't move as freely as the ones in an LP Junior? Kind of a boring question. Sorry. These aren't boring questions. These are the questions that we all have. Let's see. I don't think I can show this without disassembling a pot, but I just happen to have some pots right here. I do. This is a Mojotone vintage taper, 500K. And it turns fairly freely, but it has some resistance. I like these a lot. If I wanted to, let's see if I can get this to do the thing. Maybe, there it goes. If I wanted to make this thing have more resistance, I would take the case back off, and I would press, and I take the, it has two little metal springs inside that press on the track. I would press them down, and then I would get the right kind of grease for pots and put that in there, and that would increase the friction. I think this pot would probably please most people who aren't doing a lot of fast volume sweeps like on a telly. If I needed this to have less tension, then I would go in there and take those springs and push them up to decrease their mechanical strength, and I would remove a little bit of the grease that might already be in there. So there are ways to adjust it. But in general, the pots used on LP Junior's stock today are not very good. I would get some Mojotone vintage tapers, and an LP Junior with P90s. I would probably get the 500K, and then put a 1 meg from just across from lug 1 to 1 3, lug 1 to lug 3. And that would turn into about a 300K pot, which would be pretty much ideal for a P90. And I think those pots are like $5 each. That's not a big deal. Hey, Sun Tzu Bean, thank you very much. I'm a huge inspiration to Sun Tzu Bean. I don't know how I've managed to do that, and I'm truly sorry, but thank you. Anything you can do to make an op-amp buffered FX loop of a JVM410HJS. Wow, that's a model number that just rolls off the tongue. JVM410HJS quieter. It's quite noisy for me. I've not had this. I think that's a Satriani model. I've not had one of those in. Is the loop itself... I'd have to look at the schematic. I'm not familiar with that amp. Op amps are usually pretty quiet unless someone has done something stupid. But again, we are talking about recent production Marshall. I would have to have the circuit in front of me, and I'm sorry. But yeah, I'm sure that I or other good techs could make that work better. It could also be an issue of whatever stage is after it in the Marshall or impedance mismatches. Marshall, I'm not convinced that the people designing the amps these days, A, have ever worked on an amp, or B, play guitar. So, hey, Gam Jam Alata. Hey, Clyde, one of my Telus is on reverb for 425. Is that what they're going for? I've seen them going for higher. It's crazy. I think I sold them for 325 new at the tail end, and for most of their life, they were like 225, and I grudgingly brought them up to 250. Does it do high gain? Not really. I mean, yeah, it does actually, but it wasn't designed for that. It was designed to push a valve amp that was already capable of more. That said, yeah, it can do high gain, but it's not going to do metal. It's not going to do modern high gain. It's designed to what's the best way to put it? When it's really pushing it, you're getting a very fat, saturated sound. And it's really designed to be going into a Marshall or a Vox, which has some attitude. And Marshalls tend to be kind of bright. And so the Telos specializes in ways of shaping that high end so it's not as piercing. I think there's a reason Dave Grissom enjoyed it very much with his PRS DG amp, which is very similar to a Vox in a lot of regards. It just, smooths out at higher gain stuff. So I don't know that I could recommend the Telos if you've not played one. And the opportunity to play one is going to be rare, and I'm sorry about that. Thoughts on Buddha and Orange amps? Buddhas are terrible. I'm sorry, they're really poorly built. Orange amps, they're okay for the price. My main problem with modern production Orange tube amps, in specific, are that the alpha, not alpha, but the 16 millimeter pots they use have really poor metal construction on the bushings and shafts, and they have very long split shafts to fit through the chassis, which is quite thick with the panel. And then they have set screw knobs on split shaft pot shafts, and so the pot shafts deform. If you brush against the knob too hard, the entire shaft breaks off. You've got to pull the entire board to replace the pot, and it's a long shaft, split shaft that you can't get from most places. You have to get them from Orange. I'm not nuts about the size of the pads on their board, so it's really easy to damage things when you do replace the pots. I think that's the biggest weakness of modern Orange amps, is they cheaped out in a big way on the pots. And from their perspective, it has to last as long as the warranty. From your perspective as the owner, it'd be real nice if the 2000 amp didn't stop working because you broke the $1.50 pot. Hey, Chris R. What amps do you personally own and love? I personally own 0 amps right now. As I mentioned earlier, I don't play out anymore, and I'm surrounded by amps that 12-year-old me, 17-year-old me would have killed to even be allowed to touch in a store, let alone play. So I'm in a very privileged position where, while I do not own an amplifier, I get to experience so many great ones that I love. And I love a wide range of amps. It's not like I'm ever going to have a gun to my head, be forced to choose between a 65 AC30 and a 58 5E3 and a 66 Vibrolux reverb. But those would be 3 amps that I would certainly choose. If someone said, hey, would you like this? Oh, yes, please, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Those are very nice places to be. And there are current amps that can be made to sound like those, and hence my existence here. Also, really like Marshalls before 1983-ish. I have nothing against some 900s and 2000s. Some. I don't like the ones where they just bent the customer over and used gravel instead of jelly. But if that's not too graphic for YouTube. But that seems to be a business model of a lot of companies these days. But I have a particular fondness for a mid-70s low B plus 50-watt Marshall and earplugs or a master volume. Does my work distract from my enjoyment of them or make me appreciate them more? That's the real question. I was getting pretty burnt out towards the end of last year and the beginning of this year because you do the same things every day. And it's hard to appreciate, say, oh, that's a 64 AC10. That's a really nice thing. I'd let you hear it right now, but it's got a preamp tube that started to go and so I did not play that today. I'm going to open it up. It's hard to access the tubes in those. You'll have to make two with the 61 Reverber rocket there. I was getting really burnt out. And I took a good break, as you can notice from the absence of videos, for about a month and a half there. Almost near total absence. Taking a break, going to Europe, we went to Paris and Vienna, seeing works of art and architecture that transcended the lifespans of their creators, that still have meaning for people. I don't want to go off too much on this tangent, but it gave me a better mental place to approach the world from. And allowed me both to take my job less seriously and also to appreciate the things for what they are. So, and I'm sure that will cycle back and forth, and I may need to fuck off to London or Berlin next just to get back to my positive mental state. But, I wish I could do that at the drop of a hat, but that's a lot of saving and planning, but it will happen. Oh, yes, it will happen. Last weekend, we were in Nashville. My wife and I, we went to Nashville. A friend and client, Andy Sichon, who's the AC at the beginning of this chat, was kind enough to invite us. His band was playing in Nashville, and he said, "Hey, I'd love to meet you. We've been friends for a while." He invited us there, and got us tickets to his concert, and we delighted to. I've been talking to him fairly regularly for 3 years. It's nice to meet him in person. Nashville's not very far, but the day of the show, we were just killing time, and I went to Carter's Vintage Guitars in Nashville, which is great. I've been going to Groons all my life. I figured I'd check out Carter's, and it was nice to walk around Carter's and say, "Hey, of the 5 or 6 guitars here that I really like, it's very nice, but I already got one." To say, those are the guitars I want. I pretty much have. Is my Eric Johnson Strat the same as a 56? No, but damn, my 63 AC30, not AC30, 335 reissue is as good as a 63. Yeah, actually, it's as good or better than many actual 63s. There are 63s that are much better than it. My SG does my SG thing. My other Strat does the Rosewood neck Strat thing. I've got a Telly I'm going to be putting back together. Then, I don't need to sell 3 houses to get a 52 Telly. So that was a nice thing. But while we were there, they had a row of vintage Tweed amps. And Nikki, my wife, was looking at the price tags on them, like $5,000, $7,000, $8,000, $12,000 for all these amps. She's like, "Wow, I had no idea that these cost so much." I'm like, "Yeah, this is the same amp that you're always complaining that I need to move out of the living room." So it kind of put my job into perspective for her. Not only that these things that she was just used to seeing are valuable things, but that people have been trusting me with them, sending me these very valuable things. So, I can never take that less than seriously. I know that was another long-winded answer. I'm never going to get through all the questions in today's chat. I'm sorry. I'd love to answer all of them. It's just not going to be possible. But I will try. Let's see. Here's a question I don't understand. Gary Gratzner says, "Hi, Lyle. I have a custom Pro reverb on the way from my Pro I do work for." Oh, okay. Now I see. Okay. Can you tell me what value filter caps I'll need? And is a half-watt carbon comp 100 ohm resistor suitable for the negative feedback fix? All right. So you have an amp coming for your Pro. I'm sorry. I thought I misread it at first that you're going to have your tech do the work, and I was supposed to tell him what to do. And no, that's not good for me or your tech. All right. If you're going to change out the filter caps in the custom Pro reverb, change them out to the same spec that they already have. The ones that are in there, the values are fine. It's just that the IC caps crap out, and while you have it open, it's easy to change them out. Half-watt carbon comp is fine. I use a carbon film. There's no benefit to using a carbon comp there, and a carbon comp can fail. It's almost out of the audio path. Metal film or carbon film would be my choice. Now, that amp is coming back to me because the owner likes what I did, but there's some voicing things he wants me to change now that I got the noise dialed back. I'm going to revisit this. I changed that resistor because it had they were using the negative feedback tap off the 8 ohm tap. They had the negative feedback connected to 8 ohms, so I changed it to 100 ohms. I'm sorry, they had it connected to the 4 ohm tap, so I changed it to 100 ohms. They have two different taps on the output transformer. They have 8 and they have 4, and they're using the same switching output jacks that you find on the Hot Rod DeVille and Deluxe. So if you plug into the main, you get the 8 ohm, and if you plug in 2, then it goes to the 4 ohm tap. And they had 4 ohms, 47 ohms. And that's wrong. I changed it to 100 ohms and 40, so the 4 ohm tap and 100 ohms. I could have also probably just moved the negative feedback wire to the 8 ohm tap on the output jack. Let me confirm that, or you confirm that before you make any changes involving pulling the board. I had pulled that board because I wanted to see what they had done underneath, where all the traces were going, to see what changes they had made from this standard true AB763. And it turns out the changes they made overall were pretty smart. Most of it is just how they did the reverb on-off. So instead of switching the grid at the reverb recovery triode to ground or not, they actually left that not switching, and then they switched the feed to the reverb pot. So it made some. The rest of the board was pretty much the same, except for the tremolo, which of course is bias trim, not opto. So I had the board pulled. I'm like, okay, let's change that resistor. I think I'm right in that in the next one I'll just move the negative feedback wire to the 8 ohm tap on the main output jack. So before you pull the board, just for that one thing, confirm that. Martin Reed says, back in the 70s, I traded my original 60s AC30 for a Fender quad reverb. Oh, yeah. I still beat you with my 64 reverb traded for a JC120. But, yeah, I wouldn't ever do that again. Older Soldano combo now, good choice. That's a good amp. Mike makes a hell of an amp when Mike makes the amps. By which I mean, I have no experience of the new mini stuff. I hope Mike has control over that. He did a great design for Yamaha with iffy execution, but that's not Mike. That's Yamaha. Hey, Thorsten, I bet your amp tech will look at those mods and say, yep, it all makes sense. Let's do that. It's a really good amp. Just needs those little tweaks. Which Jensen does yours have? If you have the C12K, absolutely, anything will be better. But like I said before about there's no such thing as a best. I hope you heard that. It depends on your playing style. 90% of my clients like either the G12C or the ET65 from Warehouse. There are a lot of really good sounding speakers for Deluxe Reverb, though. It's just that the C12K is not one of them. Side note on that, forums will tell you to get the Cannabis Rex by Imminence. I don't think that's a very good sounding speaker. I'll say what I think people like it because most Deluxe reverb reissues have a 47 picofarad bright cap built in, which makes the amp a little bit painful. And you get a CRX, which doesn't have much high-end extension, it offsets that. It's much better, in my experience, or in my opinion, they dovetail, to have, just remove the bright cap, get a nice balanced sound from the amp, and then have a speaker which is capable of reproducing high-end. So I'm not a fan of the CRX. I'm not a fan of the C12K. Let's see, trying to scroll down without scrolling down so fast. Thanks, Jamming and the Jammies. Hey, Will Ray. I'm not saying that all solid-state amps will last 5 years. I'm saying that modern solid-state amps tend to use what's called an ice power module. And ice power modules don't last. Sometimes big things burn. Other times, little surface mount inductors and what's it called? Ferrite beads burn. And sometimes I've been able to fix them just by jumpering useless devices. But the usual fix for an ice module is you take it out and you pay $150. You get another ice module. You pop it in. You reconnect everything, and you have to have the right one. And you move all the pin little jumpers around to make sure it's set to the right operating conditions, and you move on. So this is very different than the solid state from the 80s and 90s, where you'd have great big power transistors, which can last a really long time until electrolytic caps dry out, or resistors associated with the high voltage or high current, really, there's not much voltage there, begins to fail and takes them out, at which point now it's really hard to find good, real transistors from that period because there are a lot of fakes sold on eBay and stuff. Man, people fake everything. It's really depressing. So it used to be that you could have like a 300 watt solid state amp that was big and heavy and gathered dust and was kind of expensive, but it would last a long time. Now, instead of 300 watts, you can get 1,000 watts, 2,000 watts, 3,000 watts, weighs 5 pounds total. You can just, toss it in your backpack. Doesn't cost that much, $300, $800, whatever. But that's called Class D. And the flip side of that is you're not going to have longevity. It's not designed to. And if you have one that lasts a long time, you have won a particular lottery. So it's not all solid state, but almost all solid state amplifiers have gone to Class D because they use much less weight, much less heat, much less cost, and it only has to last as long as their warranty. Hey, Chris Quinn, he says, I have a Marshall Lead 12 solid-state amp. I believe all the pots are 22K. I'm wondering if changing them to the more appropriate values might improve the amp's performance. Thoughts? No. Unless you are an amp designer and have that and can read their schematic, you have no guarantee that those 22K pots are not already the correct choices. Whoever designed that app was given a brief to say, hey, we got to do something that meets this price point in the market, has X features and X sounds available, and can cost no more than blah, blah, blah to make. And so if with a solid state circuit, you can say, all right, I'll just use all 22K or all 10K or all 50K pots, whatever, and I'll adjust all the other things in the amp to make that work. So there's no reason that all 22Ks cannot be fine. At the end of the day, though, it's a Marshall Lead 12 solid-state amp. It's not going to have a huge value, so there's not really much sense in putting money into changing it. Changing it may not give you the results you want. That same money would be better spent buying maybe a second amp that gives different sounds if the Marshall still works. Hey, bruh, top of the morning. Yeah, well, Dave Case, I'm not trying to say you can't use the term best, but it leads to useless conversations. And what is the best anything? What is the best car? Well, the people are going to say Bugatti, Others are going to say Porsche. Others are going to say Porsche. They're going to be wrong. But none of those will be of any damn good if you've got 12-year-olds who got to take soccer practice. For the twin reverb, are there any real alternatives for the amplifier, or is that just not out there? Oh, man, there are tons of alternatives to the twin reverb out there. But look at what the twin reverb is. Most people are only using one channel at a time. So let's just say a clean amp that can get to the point of overdrive but not full-on distortion, that will stay really clean at loud volumes, that has reverb and tremolo, and two very efficient speakers that has plenty of stage volume for larger stages. But at the same time, if you turn it down to the volume down to like 2, it's good enough to use on a lot of smaller stages without blowing things out. The only real downside to the twin reverb is its price and its weight. But so do you need 85 watts? Yes. Well, there are a lot of alternatives. Maybe you like the sound of the twin reverb, but you don't want to pay, you don't need the volume. Well, I think maybe the Sir Bella might be a good choice for you. Or, hey, I need something that's really loud but also does overdrive. Well, for some guys, that's going to be a Marshall DSL 40C, which has a pretty nice clean sound. And 40 watts is loud enough for a lot of places. You run that into a 4x12, you're going to be pretty much as loud as an 80 watt twin. So, again, it's like what's the best thing for anything? But there are a lot of alternatives to a twin reverb. It's just that the twin reverb, when it's working right and when it's a good example, it's a pretty spectacular thing to play. Especially if you really are a player who takes advantage of right-hand dynamics. Ward Ackerman asks, is there still a tube shortage, or has that kind of leveled out? Well, it is leveled out to a large degree. It used to be that we had Chinese production, which was mainly Schwagang. We had Slovakian production, which was JJ. And we had Russian production. And the Russian, the Mike Matthews stuff, that was Electro-Harmonics, Sovtek, Mullard Reissue, Tungsol, a few others. And then there's all the companies like Gold Lion that just buy tubes from those other companies, and then they cryogenically treat it. They put it in a different black box with cooler print, and they charge you 4 or 5 times as much for the same tube that they bought from Sovtek or whatever. Ruby and Groove Tubes do the same thing, but they don't do the cryogenics bullshit, and the markup's not crazy. They just buy and sort tubes. Now, there is a trickle of the Russian tubes in. I'm not sure that the quality there is where it was 5 years ago. The embargo is still in place. I'm not sure where how those Russian tubes are getting here. And while I have used some for clients, I have a very hard time supporting Russia in anything right now. My thoughts are with their people, but as far as the government, anyway. The Schwagang factory in China, which was the world's largest manufacturer of tubes, had a fire and is being rebuilt. There is a new Chinese factory called Pisvane. I'm sure it's something better in Chinese, but that's their English trading name, which is terrible. But anyway, Tube Amp Doctor, which I believe is based in Germany, is either buying tubes from them that have passed a certain criteria, or having that factory make tubes to their spec. And right now, the Tube Amp Doctor Red Base series, which are made in the new Chinese plant, I don't know whether they're made to Tube Amp Doctor spec or they just go through different levels of QC. Those have been the best bets, but not all vendors have them. JJ, I know that they were hit really badly by COVID, but they've been having some serious issue with the glass being too thin or fragile. Tubes losing vacuum left and right, and combo tubes, combo amps, their 6L6s and 6V6s tend to be very microphonic very quickly. So it is better than it was. It is nowhere near where it was 3-4 years ago. I hope a year from now I can say, whoa, wasn't that fun? Things are better. I would like to get it to the point where it's just a matter of hey, now they can actually compete with each other and see who has to make the best quality tube, as opposed to, hey, we're the only ones with stock for the next 6 months. Let's raise the prices. Funny how that works. Hi, Michael. Michael Crouchelli says, "Hi, Lyle. I'm new to the business tech who is looking to aspire to my level of knowledge. Any interest in being a mentor?" And hey, Scott Brockaway. Well, Michael, I appreciate that. That's a huge compliment. And this is maybe unfair because some people who have helped me along the way gave me their time, but in retrospect, I never had that much of their time. I would have about 20 minutes here. 3 months later, 15 minutes, just phone calls. And I wrote down everything that they said. But that was in the early days of the internet. I mean, these guys I met on Usenet, a lot of the information that they gave me is out there. And what they really did was pointed me to where to find the information, which books to get. And they'd say, go read this book. And I would. So my mentors were really very specialized librarians who spent some time to talk about some theoretical stuff and said, yeah, well, you need to go read Jack Dar. You need to read this. You need to figure out how figure out how load lines work, and go to the library and get look up on a book on this. And so my mentoring experience, while I appreciate those guys taking that time, today it would be like, okay, go read the Radiotron Designer's Handbook. Go get Merlin Blenco's books on designing preamps and power sections. Read the Jack Dar book. Go build 100 pedals until you really understand how the circuit works with op amps, and then apply that to tubes. So I guess what I'm saying is, while I had mentors, they were really telling me where to spend my own time, and I have put in that time, and I would advise you to do the same. There are no shortcuts. I'm sitting here at the end of a 30-year effort doing this, and believe me, it's only in the last year and a half that it's been people paying attention to me and stuff like this. It was a lot of years of just tinkering and saying, well, what happens if I do this? Everyone says do this. Why? Well, how do voltage dividers work? What does impedance matter? Is impedance the same as resistance? And all these things I had to figure out. And how not to burn myself or blow shit up too much or electrocute myself. So I think, honestly, as much as I would like to, I'm flattered, and I would like to, I have very small amounts of free time. And I think for any aspiring tech, I've got like 900 videos up, and I do these live chats. So I think if you were to go back and look through all my videos, you would find a lot. Write stuff down, take notes, and then, once or twice a month when I do these live streams, I'll be glad to answer any questions that I can. I'm not trying to be unhelpful, but I'm flattered. But I think people today sometimes expect to be given, here are the keys, just do this. And that has not been my experience of how anything works. Yeah, Matt Fields. I think the Jupiter LCP is made by WGS. Yeah, and I agree with you absolutely. The LCP I've not experienced, but yeah, you know what you're talking about. The vintage Oxford sound is that's that sound. It's a little bit boxy but kind of cool. It's a little bit hunky but kind of cool. And the Imminence little buddy gets there too. Yeah. Basically, I tell people, versus the G12C versus ET65 or the Creamback, I tell people, if your favorite clean sound is like Stevie Ray's Little Wing or Stevie Ray's Riviera Paradise, you want the G12C. If your favorite clean sound is Robin Ford, you want the ET65 or the Creamback. And that's kind of the two fender cleans. And if you're smart, you'll figure out a way to have both. Speaking of which, we've been going for just over an hour. I think we're going to take about a 7-minute break. Let's everyone go to the fridge, get something. Let's everyone do whatever they need to do, and we'll be back in 7 minutes, and then we will get back to the barbecue in Paris. Sorry about that. I hope I wasn't too late. Couldn't find the half and half. The important things, you know, man. All right, let's see. Where were we? Ginray Miner says, thoughts on Imminence speaker choices. I'm a Kentucky boy myself. Any preferences? Well, Imminence makes their strength and their weakness is that they have so many different models. They have some speakers that I love and some speakers that I don't love. I will say across the board, I'm not a fan of whatever plating that they use on their lugs. They have designed in such a way, I guess, for major manufacturers to use them as OEM with quick connects, but soldering to those connections can be really tough. You really got to get in there with some sandpaper to get the solder to stick. So they're not one of my favorites to work with. And a lot of the speakers that I like have been out of stock for a while, like the GA, the Alessandros, which sound good. They have some really nice sounding speakers and some I don't care for. And one of the things which is always a factor when I get speakers for people is what price I can get speakers for people for. For instance, Imminence, I have very good prices through one distributor, but I have shipping on that. So sometimes for Imminences, the best price is actually with partsexpress.com, which has free shipping. So the price I can get is the same price that you can get, really. Even though I can get that speaker for less, I have to pay shipping. I have better prices as far as a discount on Celestion. So I can get a Celestion for you much cheaper than you can buy a Celestion. And I get really good discounts, dealer pricing on Warehouse, and I make that available to the end user. I make my money on the installation, so I'm not charging a dealer profit on Warehouse speakers. I'm just getting them at a reduced price. I pass it on to the owner. I'm typically doing the installation, so there's some labor there. It balances out. They ended up getting the speaker installed for the same price the speaker would cost them. So these are my factors. If someone wants a specific speaker, if someone says, hey, I want Scumbacks, okay, I'll get you Scumbacks. Someone wants Celestions, no problem. If you want Imminence, no problem. But a lot of times people are like, hey, what sounds really good for the least amount of money? And it's not that Warehouse sounds good for the least amount of money. It's that coincidentally, it's one of the less expensive speakers. But if someone is really broke, I'll use a Jensen MOD series for someone, $30. There you go. You got a speaker. It makes sound. Is it the best? No. Is it acceptable? Yeah, it's pretty good. And some guys are like, well, I like that sound, but my back is killing me. And that's one of the reasons I've been very happy to discover that of all the Neo speakers out there, the Celestion Neo Creamback actually does not suck. It actually sounds really good, unlike some of the other Neos I've tried from them and other companies. I don't know, all that's subjective, but it's my opinion, so it's right. It's my channel. It's my channel. So, also, Ginray, Warehouse is also Kentucky. So if you're a Kentucky boy, Warehouse is also one of you guys. Marshall Quinn, if you dig the Marshall E12, that's fine. I've got no, it's not Marshall E. Actually, I do have a Marshall E12 in the back. It's got a problem with the direct output circuitry, which is useless, causing weird behavior in the actual speaker out. So I've got to track that down. Yeah, the Marshall E12s are a particular sound. I know that Billy Gibbons used them a lot in the studio. He may or may not have taken one of those things with the back off and placed it face up on a giant wooden floor with a speaker above it and turned the entire floor of the studio into a cabinet. He may or may not have done that on a lot of things you think are much bigger, more impressive amplifiers. Guitar lessons. How was the barbecue in Paris? I have no idea. I certainly didn't try the damn barbecue in Paris. Bless their hearts. It's like when I ordered a BLT in London and got that English streaky bacon. It wasn't even streaky bacon. It was just Canadian bacon. I think they boiled it. So it was white bread, boiled Canadian bacon, the world's limpest piece of lettuce, a pale pink, almost orange tomato with no flavor, and like 3 inches of mayonnaise. So that was a very disappointing BLT. That was the first night I was there, and all the restaurants were closed, and the only thing I could do was room service. And the only thing I could afford from room service at that hotel was the BLT. When in Paris, when in any major world city, there is so much wonderful food from all over the world to try. But, barbecue, I wouldn't get it in New York either. I would about as far-flung a barbecue as I would try would be the south side of Chicago, because my brothers there know what they're doing. But in general, it is regional specific, and I'm from northeastern Arkansas, so I barely consider what they do in Texas to be barbecue. Let's see, where's my mouse? Scott Brockaway says, where's our champion legend? Brad has been swamped with work. He has just been really stressed. I love the man for all his vulgarities. He's a true vulgarian. But I know that he has just been busy as hell. So it is my high hope that right now he is either asleep, because it is really damn early there. It's like 7 a.m. in Australia, or that he is somewhere out hiking a trail in a beautiful countryside, which is something he likes to do. And he is taking his mind off amplifiers for a little bit of time, because he has been burning every end of every conceivable candle, and we have all been there, and my heart goes out to him. He also just lost a friend, and it's not my place to speak for him in regards to that, but I know that has hit him hard. So Brad, if you see this, you're in our thoughts, man. Christopher Sambuca says, Jupiter has some film foil caps in 250 and 500 pachyferid values. Have I tried film caps as treble caps and tone stacks? Yeah, I've tried everything. The Jupiter things, that's marketing. That's just marketing. No classic amps ever used film caps for those values, because it's an extraordinarily expensive and rare thing to find a film cap in those values. Some guys use polystyrenes, which can sound nice. Pardon me, they're very linear, and they don't distort, and they're perfect for hi-fi applications. Pardon me, I've got hiccups. But the leads on those things are so flimsy. But part of the magic of what we like about guitar amps are nonlinear things, and there's a reason. Fender and Jim and the guys all, Leo and Jim Marshall and everyone use cheap ceramic, and typically ceramic, and then later some mica caps, because they were cheap and they're readily available. And in Marshall's case, I think he was getting a lot of World War II surplus stuff that wasn't very good on paper, but it behaved in such interesting ways when the sound is good, like the Fender. They're using ZV series caps, which are terrible. You'd never choose that for audio, except they tend to sound good. So I found some, like the 562R series that Vishay makes today in the 1 kilovolt range, sound and perform an awful lot like the old ZV series that Fender used, but they have better temperature behavior. and they don't drift as much. The old ZVs that Fender used drift in values a lot. Case in point, I think it was a Super Reverb about 6 months ago, where you flip the bright switch and it would get a little bit brighter, not much. I'm like, well, that cap's drifted, and then that's just experience. I disconnected one end of that cap, so it was out of circuit. Actually, I just turned the switch off, so it was out of circuit. I measured the cap, and the 120 picofarad cap measured like 30 picofarad. It had just drifted so much because the old ceramics, they're affected by humidity and temperature. And so that's why you didn't hear much change. And I know, I won't speak for other techs, but much younger me would have gone through everything else in the app and said, hey, I'm losing treble. The bright isn't working. Is it a bad switch? Is it bad this? What about this? I'm going to change all these things. No, it's just that old cap wasn't great. And too much value is given for the wrong reasons to original parts. So that original part left the amp. It went home in a Ziploc bag, and a new 562R series 120 picofarad was in its place, and the amp, hey, it was 1966 all over again. Let's see. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, everyone's saying nice things about the GA Imminence, the Alessandros. They are great. They've just been out of stock in a lot of sizes and wattages and impedances. Hopefully that's resolved. I've not checked in the last 6 months or so. Okay. Emmett Otter asked a question near and dear to my heart, something that I had to learn. What's the simplest way to match audio and mic'd amp to iPhone video in a DAW, both mediums through different sources, in other words? Well, here's what I have always done. Not always, but what I've done since I've buckled down and gotten serious about this. And you can do this with almost any budget if you have the right program. Now, I use Premiere Pro for this, but I believe you can do this even in GarageBand. And I'm pretty sure you can do this in DaVinci Resolve, which is a free, though resource-intensive video editing software program, which is available for PC. But I'm on the Mac, and I know you can do this in Final Cut Pro as well, but I'm using Premiere Pro. You just have the two audio tracks there. So you have your video, and it has its audio file, and then you have what you recorded with a mic. And so if I'm doing a real playing video, I'll have the camera. It used to be just the iPhone with its audio, and I'm using its audio for my voice. So I typically would have a lav mic mounted. I've got a wireless one now, but I used to just have a long cable. So I'm wearing this. So my lav mic is always the same distance from my mouth. So as I move around, the sound stays consistent. And so that's recording into the camera, being recorded along with the video. And so I bring that file into my program, and then I'd have the video, and it'd be tied to its audio track. Then I'd have a 57 or whatever on the actual speaker that I'd be recording into Logic, and I'd just record that as a WAV file and bring that WAV file into Premiere. And I'd have the video and its audio, and then I'd have the track for the amp audio. And then I could select both and click synchronize, and it would say, okay, this is where the audio lines up right there. And it was accurate to within a frame. I shoot at 24 frames per second for that kind of stuff. So the audio is never perfect in sync, because it would be like a half frame to sync them perfectly. One of the reasons I'm considering going to 60 frames per second for future videos when I'm doing serious audio. If you don't have the ability to sync within your program, then all you can either do this at the beginning of each, and it gets kind of picked up by whatever you're using for voice and for the speaker, or what I would typically do, because I would be sure that both speakers would get this, is I would take the guitar and go, and I'd see it on the video, and I'd have that waveform on the video audio, and that waveform would also be on the real track. And then you can just drag and nudge the real audio until it aligns with what's coming out of your vocal mic, voice mic. At which point, you don't want both playing at the same time, typically, because there's going to be phase issues. So I would always do, sometimes I would just make cuts in the video, which had the voice, and the chunks where the guitar was playing, I would just mute. Sometimes I do a quick crossfade. Basically, you want to transition from what the mic's hearing of your voice to the other mic hearing the guitar. If you do have both up, you'll typically want to lower the vocal mic quite a bit just to give a little bit of room ambience, but make sure you're not going to be introducing any phase weirdnesses. So there are ways to do it. There are more easy ways to do it on a Mac than a PC, but on a PC, if you were using, what's the one? Begins with an A. I can't remember the free DAW. Anyway, there are free DAWs which can deal with video on the PC, and there is video editing which deals with audio on the PC, like DaVinci. You can make it happen. But those are the two tricks. See if you can synchronize within the program. If not, match that or the whack transient in the waveforms. Yeah, Matt is talking about making pots stiffer. Bonjour, Juax from Paris. Thank you very much. I really had a wonderful time in Paris. I don't want the barbecue, but everything else was quite wonderful, except for the coffee. We need to talk about coffee, Paris. This Café de Richard, that's French for Cisco. Every place I went where the coffee cup said Café de Richard was crap. Some of the places had fantastic coffee, but they never had that on the cups. If you are in the third or the fourth in the Marais, I recommend Les Philosophes. Wonderful, best meal of my entire trip. Les Philosophes, it's on Rue de Temple, I believe. Rue de Temple or Rue de Temple Vieille. Rue de Temple. Anyway, it's in the Southern Marais, and was just everything was fantastic, up to and including the double espresso. The loop is part of the noise gate circuit. Oh, I'd have to look at that amp, man. I don't have experience with that model. Hey, Z5, regards from Germany. Thank you. I'm looking forward to getting to Germany someday. We were in Vienna after Paris last month, 2 months ago. Wow, has it been that long? And we loved Vienna, and Nikki is doing a research project on the Bauhaus, and if we can get the grant that she's working towards, we expect to be going to Dessau and Dresden and Weimar and Berlin, especially Berlin. So, and until I speak, no one knows I'm not from there. It's great. I get the same reaction in Germany as I would in Scotland. The Piano Cube guy says, what's my opinion of PRS amps? It varies. The David Grissom model is really good. Some of the very early ones, I think it was HDX, where they were like chasing an individual amp that was used at the Fillmore, were very good. A lot of their amps I don't care for. The Custom C and Custom H, I don't like the very flimsy single-sided PCBs masquerading as eyelet boards. If you do any work on them, the pads want to lift, and you have to do work on them because they used 1N4148s where they should have used 1N4007s. The wire routing is poor. The gain staging is poor on those. I'm not a fan of how they were designed or executed. They've got a new one out, a new model out that people were allegedly going nuts over about 6 months ago. I saw every guitar YouTube channel had it on the same day and just said fantastic things, something 20, HRX 20, whatever. I have not tried one in real life. I've seen photos of the inside, though, and it is seemingly much better built than the Custom C and the Custom H. So I have high hopes that it is in fact fantastic. And for the like Sanseras and stuff, no, just no. So I think PRS guitars are their strength. The amps, I know Doug Sewell has done a lot of the designs, and some of the stuff is fantastic, and some of the stuff, as I mentioned, has some issues. I don't think that Doug's responsible for the issues, but I don't think the amplifiers are necessarily PRS's strength. I'll say it that way. I also don't like their pots in their guitars. The pots in their guitars look really cheap. The wiring is never very good. The caps attachments are kind of flimsy, and I don't, full circle to earlier in the chat, I don't like the tension or the taper on their pots. So if I had a PRS, the first thing I would do would be change out the pots, because I don't know what's up with that. So their wood is really well done. I'm not sure about their electronics. I've never bonded with PRS guitars, and I have tried and tried. I think they are excellent guitars for someone else. Yeah. Well, actually, sorry, I started to get to Peaceful Warrior. I almost missed Greg McCourt. Hey, Rob F. Greg McCourt says, I want to be able to set up and change pickups on my guitars. How much can I do at home, and where can I learn how? You can do all of that at home. Where to learn how? There's a lot of videos out there. Now, the trouble with sending you out to YouTube World is that not all the videos are any damn good. And you don't know until you've seen it. If you're on Facebook, look up Lane Sparber guitars. He's a friend of mine. He's a tech in Queens, and he shows pickup changes and wiring on his Facebook thing a lot. And I think he might be on Instagram, Lane, Lane, Sparber, Sparber. And he does mostly pictographs of showing how he does stuff and how important it is. That's a good thing, because you're going to see how it should be done, and you can kind of figure out how it was done based on that stuff. I have a handful of videos on here on wirings that I've done, and I stand behind them 100%. I think they're great, but I also am not doing them as tutorials. So again, you're seeing the end result. I'm not showing a lot of the actual soldering. How to solder is important. I think there's a video by Electric Lady where she shows some soldering techniques, and she's got some good information there. But I don't watch a lot of YouTube guitar videos myself, because it's my day gig, and when I punch out the clock, I punch out the clock. But Fozzy Electric. She I think she's got a good series. I think her is Colleen. Colleen's got some good stuff on that. And I think Phil McKnight. Know Your Gear, who is kind enough to mention my channel on his channel a few months back. I think he's got some good stuff on that. A guy I like, Puisheen, Puisheen. He specializes in offset guitars, so Jazz Masters and Jaguars. His name's Mike. I don't know him, but I enjoy his videos because he's really, seemingly, just one of the nicest guys in the world, and he loves what he loves. He's one of the two people who runs Mike and Mike's Guitar Bar, which is a vintage guitar shop up in, I think, Portland. And I've looked at their website, and I can't afford to pay Portland prices, but he does setups and gets all the guitars in their inventory really nice, apparently. Anyway, he's got a lot of really nice videos, and the stuff that goes into a Jazz Master is the same kind of work that goes into any electric guitar. He's another good one to look at. And normally I would say T. Woodford, but I think Ted would be the first to say that electronics is not his forte. But if I'm watching guitar videos, I'm typically watching T. Woodford, because Ted is masterful at what he does, and shows so many things that would never occur to the rest of us is, like, all right, I want to do A, then I want to do B. No, wait, no, between A and B, there's 27 other steps. You can't go from A to B. And so it really shows me how much I don't know about those things, about actual lutherie, which is not the same thing as guitar repair. I'm quite good at many things that we put into the bag of guitar repair. My kid just got this Jackson. My kid's into metal. It's a pretty nice guitar for $200. I think he got it used. I'm going to do some setup stuff. But, if I needed to replace the nut, I could replace the nut. If it had a high fret, I could deal with that. It had a loose fret, I could deal with that. If it needed to be leveled and dressed, I could deal with that. Intonation, no problem. Relief, no problem. Pretty much anything that could happen to this guitar, I know how to fix and fix perfectly. If I were to go in the other room and grab one of my acoustics, and it's time to change the neck angle, we got to do a neck reset. No, I am know-how qualified, but I love to watch Ted do it, especially when he gets a guitar where there's a hidden bolt that wasn't supposed to be there, or they put the top on over the dovetail, and you can see him just holding back rage, justifiable rage. Peaceful Warrior, I have worked on the Fuchs Casino series. Every Fuchs I've had has been fantastic. Caveat, I guess, Andy's a friend of mine. So whether I like his amps because he's my friend, or whether you think he's my friend because I like his amps, it's the latter. I knew of his amps long before I knew him. In fact, one of the first times I spoke to Andy was I believe it was a casino that came in, and there was a resistor that had burned out, and it was the only resistor of its kind, and I couldn't read the value. And I called Fuchs, and Andy answered the phone, and I said, hey, I got this casino, whatever, and R7-321 is burnt out, and I can't read it. What's that supposed to be? And he said, oh, man, yeah, that happened on the early ones. We used a 1K. We changed it to a 2.2K, and it never happened again. And, stuff like that. And that's how you meet people in the industry. And we'd seen each other's posts online on various things. And so, conversational ice broken. We don't talk all the time, but when we do, it's always very easy. And it's just nice to know that, yeah, he's a total pro. All the series, all the Fuchs that I've had, all the ones I've heard have been great. They're not all to my taste. That's why he has all these different models. But, he makes some really nice amps. Hey, Matt Fields, yeah, character. It's all about character. The flip side of choosing components for character in amps is that there's a lot of snake oil out there, and a lot of stuff you're being sold a character change that doesn't exist. But for whatever reason, and I'm sure there are reams of physics that would support this, material differences in a picofarad value make a lot more difference at voltage than material differences in a larger nanofarad or microfarad value. Maybe it's sensitivity and the frequencies affected, in terms of how we hear. I'm not sure. I haven't had time to look into it. There's a lot about this that I'm still learning, and some stuff I probably never will get around to, or by the time I get around to reading about it, I'll be too deaf to appreciate. I'm nowhere close to deaf now. I still have a young man's hearing, and he wants it back. Ooh, have I worked on a Sun Model T? Yeah, I'm not a big fan of old Sun amps. I find the chassis flimsy for the weight that they have to bear. There's a Sun 2000, either in the early days of this YouTube channel or it's on the Facebook thing, where I pretty much gutted it and made it a high watt, which is what it was pretending to be. I mean, it was never as bad as like a sound shitty, but I've not been a big fan of the Suns. Thanks, DLPZ 2005. Appreciate that. You got an 18-watt Marshall 1974 if you want a 36 watt version of that, the Badger 35 is a fantastic amp, but it is not a 30 watt version of the 1974. I have not had a Badger on the bench, so I cannot speak to what it definitely is, but I know that it's not a 1974. The closest amp to the 74 that I know of commercially was the London and London Pro from 65 amps, one channel of which was the 1974. I think the trim channel. The other one's EF86. So it's like an old AC15 on one side and the 74X on the other side, though they had an issue with how they turned the tremolo on and off. And the tremolo in the 74 is never great, but aside from the tremolo, it's a nice sounding amp. The issue there with the 18 watt, the 74 was a budget option because it only used two 84s. And most Marshalls went from that to they had a few 20 watt models, but typically then they go to two 34s. So you go pretty much from 18 to 50 watts. And realistically, that's about what you can hear the difference in. Now, that said, a JTM 45 is not 50 watts. A JTM 45 is not 45 watts. A JTM 45 measured clean is about 33, 32 watts, 35. Same as an AC30, measured clean is about closer to 40 watts. A JTM 45 and an AC30 have about the same volume in the room. One's 30, one's 45. As I tried to show in the video on the Friedman the other day, where you list your wattage is kind of marketing derived. So I could take a 15 watt, I could call an amp 18 watts, 15 watts, or 20 watts, depending on how much distortion I want to allow at the point of measuring. So is it where the sine wave says it's clean? Is it where our ears say it's clean? Or do you go to the next step, which is what you have to do for hi-fi stuff, and say total harmonic distortion is at X percent? That's something that most guitar amps don't do because we're not concerned with total harmonic distortion. But you can call an amp 35, 45, or even 50, and you're accurate enough. So there's a lot of marketing on that kind of stuff. I would say if you really love your 18 watt clone and you just want more stage volume, get another 1x12 or 2x12 extension cabinet for larger gigs. Because if you double the number of speakers, you add the same 3 dB that doubling the power would give you anyway. A little more complicated than that in terms of how much wattage each speaker receives. But a 1x12 for small gigs, and then that same 1x12 running into a 2x12, so you have 3 speakers total. That's a big stage volume increase, and the larger cabs kind of give you bigger sounds. A lot of what we perceive as larger, louder amps is really larger volume cabinets with more speakers pushing more air. So try plugging your amp into a 2x12 before you buy anything else if you like the sound of your amp. Hello, Darren Farrell from Ireland. The word of mouth impressions on Ingle that I hear from other techs is not good, but I don't like. We're not one to go around repeating rumors, You'll never hear one of us repeating gossip, so you better be sure and listen close the first time. I don't want to talk shit about something if I have not had experience with it myself, and they may be fantastic. So, best wishes to Ingle, but I've heard things from other techs that make me skeptical of their value as an investment. I'll just say that. But ask a bunch of techs over on your side of the pond who are going to have more experience with them. Mad Max, yeah, that's so funny. I go to guitar shops just to verify I already got the right guitars and amps. Yeah, right. And Matt, he has 7 Strats. I only have 2. Clyde Broadway says, favorite clean and dirty humbuckers. That's going to depend on who's playing them. Almost any humbucker being played by someone else in this town is probably going to be better than the results I get. I've got some, I'm not sure whether to disclose this yet. Oh, what the hell, no one cares. I got some low output, what are they? Bare knuckles. I ordered some low output bare knuckles before Christmas for my 335, and they arrived, and I measured the DCR, and the DCR was really low, like 6.3 to 7K, which is about, I was expecting like 6.7 to 7.2K for that particular set, and these are measuring DCR well underneath that. Now, DCR is not always an indication of output, and I know this. DCR is an indicator of differences between two pickups that are wound, constructed exactly the same way with the same wire, at which point you can say, hey, the one with the higher DCR has more winds of said wire. That's the only place where you can make a comparison. You can't say, well, this pickup in a metal case measures 8K, this pickup in a metal case measures 6K, therefore the 8K is going to be louder because the 6K may be ceramic. You don't, unless you know all this stuff. Anyway, I've not put them in yet because I've been so busy, and I was on the fence about putting some low output pickups. Something that measures that low, but I'm going to try it. Bare knuckles got a really good reputation, and because I hemmed and hawed, I've waited past the return period. So I'm going to put them in the guitar, and I think I'm going to do a quick connect sort of rig in the guitar. So if I don't care for the pickups, I don't have to undo the harness, because 335s are a bitch. So I'm going to do some kind of connection that'll be underneath the pickups and the cavities. It'll be fine. I'm not touring the world. So if I don't care for them, I can remove them. The ends will still, the leads will still be long. I could resell them. But from what I've heard, I really like lowish output PAFs for just about everything, with some exceptions. If you watch Doug and Pat, some of the best sounds they ever get with a gold top, I think they call it Oscar. Those things are like 6.5 to 7K. So low output DCR. Great bloom, great harmonic response, clean overdrive, all from one pickup. So for most playing styles, I don't think there's such thing as a clean pickup or a dirty pickup. That said, for certain Van Halen things, you want a hotter PAF style. You know, if you're really into Def Leppard, you know, a super distortion is the way to go. I would have no use for a super distortion. I don't like the way they sound on clean at all. So in that specialized world, yeah, that's a dirty pickup. So you get your Jackson, Phil Collin, and you got your super distortion that's just going to drive the hell out of your Marshall JMP preamp. And then you have something here that coil taps. So you have a dramatically less output here for your cleans, and then you have full, you know, the full blower thing. But that's a real specialty thing, and I have not wanted to sound like Def Leppard in a really long time. But as to best pickups, see earlier comments on best. A great player is going to sound fine with stock Epiphone pickups. A bad player, no amount of money spent on the pickups will change that. And there's always a point of diminishing returns. If you go from Duncan design to Duncan's, you're going to get a huge increase in sound quality. If you go from Duncan's to Lawler's, or Duncan's to, you know, you name the boutique pickup of choice, there may or may not be a sonic change, and it may or may not be beneficial. You know, say Duncan's versus Throwback. Well, Throwbacks are $500 sets. Duncan's are $250, $300 a set, depending on the Duncan's. Let's say Antiquities to Throwbacks. They're built similarly. Throwback is built more accurately. Well, Duncan is a large company that can afford to have tooling for this. Well, Throwback is a small company, and he's got to pay a lot for the tooling to make fewer products. So the price justification is really not because you're getting more pickup from Throwback. It costs Throwback more to make, what he considers the perfect PAF versus what Duncan considers a good enough PF that people like, but it costs Duncan a lot less to make that one pickup because they're making 1,000 of that model a month, and they already have all the tooling paid for, whereas Throwback only has the tooling for these things and has to have the molds made, and he only may make 200 a month versus 1,000 a month. So the price per unit has higher costs. At the end of all that, if you like the sound of the Throwback, great. You've supported a small business, someone who seems to be passionate about what he does, and it will probably sound great. But you may also be happy with the Duncan Antiquity, even though it's not going to have the cachet now that it had 10 years ago when they were just the shit and everyone wanted them. It's a funny old world with guitars. That said, at the end of the day, a great player is going to sound better on this $200 Jackson than I do on my 335. And I'm not putting myself down. I'm not a bad guitarist, but I have enough clients who are professional, world-class musicians that I know the enormous gulf between me and them, and I'm glad that they still take my phone calls. All right, let's move on. Drinks and Jam says, thoughts on Top Hat amps. I've only had one in. You can see my review of it. It was a Top Hat, I think Super Royale 35, I think. And I gave it really good marks. I really thought that was a really well-made amp. I disagreed with it, a couple of pot taper choices. It was a pot taper choice and the placement of the master volume within the circuit. I disagreed with it. That's subjective. I gave my reasoning pro and con, but there was nothing wrong with that amp. And if it does the sounds that you like, I thought it was a hell of a deal. You could get that used Top Hat Royale for about the same price as a new Deluxe Reverb reissue, and there's just no comparison. Now, that said, you're going to be able to find that Deluxe Reverb reissue everywhere all the time, and the Top Hat Royale at that price may be less frequent. So sometimes you have to wait and see what you can get. Just like with the Duncan versus Throwback example. It costs a lot more to make smaller numbers of things. So if you're getting a Top Hat amp, they're not making as many a month as Fender does, and they don't get the same bulk price discounts on parts, and it costs them more to ship things. They don't have the big distribution deals, so their end product costs more than the comparable product from a large company. So you're paying a little bit more just because it exists in the first place. But I think you get an awful lot for that. Hey, Rob, I don't have any experience or opinion with or of high-tone amps. I hope they do good work. DR504s are fantastic, and hopefully they follow the recipe closely enough. But I don't have any conjecture. Jatuka says, are today's mica caps reliable as 250 picofarad tone stack cap? Yeah, they are. Just don't get the ones that say SM. Get the ones that say CDM or CDE, or pay more for the ones that say Sozo. Not to be confused with Zoso. But the ones that say SM are crap. But, Fender didn't actually use silver micas, so I use ceramic like Leo did. Yeah, the 500 volt mica caps, which fail at 200 volts, they say SM. They just say SM. They don't say Cornell Duplier on them. Drinks and Jam says, I've heard Dr. Z's are closer to Fender Vox, while Top Hats are more Marshall Vox. What does this mean in your opinion? Nothing. It means nothing to me. I see these kinds of statements on all the gear forums, and I think most people are deriving that by the Tolex choices than the circuit choices. I think very few other people could tell me the difference between a Fender circuit and a Marshall circuit if I put the schematic in front of them. The Fender, the Vox, the Marshall, they're all pretty much the same circuit with different voltages, a few different values. The output section is a big difference in all three of those things and how it's configured and what tubes, etc. But, if you get something with a Deluxe valence up top and then some kind of bright metal strip and then grill cloth beneath, you go Vox Marshall. If it just grill cloth with knobs up top, it's Fendery. I think people hear with their eyes way too much. It sounds mean of me, but it's true. See, Matt Fields there mentions class 2 when he's talking about ceramic disc caps. That's a big can of worms that I've alluded to in a lot of videos. Class 2 is exactly what an electrical engineering teacher would tell you do not want, but it is one of the wonderful things about guitar amps that class 2 distorts in weird and wonderful ways. Maybe someday I'll spend some time, hook up a scope and show that, but I'm not sure that anyone would know what they were seeing. But you sure can hear it when the moon is in the 7th house. Clark Blacker says, I own a mostly original early 64 Super Reverb in good cosmetic and electrical condition. I am 72, still making music and releasing it online. Good on you, man. Way to go. Due to its size, should I sell it now and just downsize? I can't answer that for you, Clark. If you're using it all the time, no, it's got to be one of the best sound production gizmos on the planet. That said, the market's kind of crazy high still. I'm not sure whether it's peaked now or going down. It's hard for me to keep track of the used market. So if you look around and the prices are just crazy high and the money would be of more use to you, sure, sell it. But if you still get enjoyment out of it or you still get utility out of it, hold on to it. You can always sell it later. Someone's going to buy that. So Tim Connors, I'm having issues with managing time and supplies on making amps, so I'm hoping to get back to it. It's tough. It's a really tough 3 years in the industry and just supply chain stuff. So I started that ball rolling right before COVID hit, and if the worst thing that happens to me as a result of the pandemic is that project get pushed back a few years, I can live with that because I know a lot of people whose lives were ended and ruined and upended by the whole thing. So, it was a bad week to stop sniffing glue in my experience. Antonio Monteroso asks, can a hobbyist get a good amp building one of the Mojo Tone kits? Would love to own a hand-wired Princeton, but the Mojo kit seems more economical. Yes, a hobbyist can. Most do not. You can get great results building a Mojo Tone kit. Most builders don't. Most people don't know what's important when they're assembling things, or they get impatient. There's a channel I will not mention because it seems unfair. They make custom guitars, kind of telly-based, and they use really nice woods, and they have really neat neck joints, and they seem to really know what they're doing on building guitars. And one of them put together a Deluxe reverb kit. I think it was the Mojo Tone. And everyone, all their followers say, "Oh, great job. You're doing wonderful. That sounds fantastic." It was a terrible, terrible job. And that amp's not going to be reliable. And it didn't sound very good. And it's pretty typical. There's more to it than just connecting the dots. And Mojo Tone's instructions are very variable depending on the model. And sometimes the instructions are not great, or they don't show things like, hey, you really need to secure that board to the chassis. Or even going so far as to tell people, it's okay if it's just hanging by the wires connecting it, that'll be fine. Or they have polarity switches, or they have neutrals switched. I could tell you 100 things that Mojotone won't tell you, but it's a long, boring list. So yes, you can do it, but I would really suggest researching an awful lot before you start. And as far as the Princeton goes, I've got an awful lot of examples of 60s and 70s Princetons on my channel, where I show you at least my right way to do it, which is not too far removed, if at all, from Randall Smith and Leo's and Lupe's way to do it. So it can be done. It just rarely is. I have no thoughts on the TubeWorks tube driver amps, other than the power amps used to be pretty ubiquitous, I guess in the early 90s, but I have no experience of them. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, Antonio Matt Fields is correct. Do it. You can get good results, and you'll learn an awful lot, but do it slowly, do it methodically, and have photos of, say, a 66 in front of you at all times, and look at how the 66 is really laid out. And if you find instructions saying put a bus bar across the pots, throw that out. If the instructions say run the neutral to the power switch and the hot to the fuse, that's not good instructions. If it has a polarity switch active at all with a capped chassis, that's not good. There are places where it needs to be exactly like Leo did it, for instance, the grounds and the lead dress, and there are places where there are modern safety codes that you need to adhere to, particularly with AC mains wiring. And I show that in a lot of my videos. Yeah, Tony Flamini. Is that Flamingo? No, it's Flaminio. Hey, Tony. Says, hey, Lyle, have you checked out the 12-inch Alessandro SC64? Yeah, we referred to that earlier in the video. Yeah, they're really good speakers. Thoughts on Sun. Asked and answered, Clyde. Asked and answered. Lefty Mike says, have I ever or would I consider designing an amp for a major company? Thanks. Yeah, I would love to. I have not been asked. I have burned some bridges in the industry by showing the Emperor's New Duds on here so much, and I've built some good bridges, you know. So there are companies where I am persona non grata, and another large company offered me a job, which was very flattering, but I had to decline because my wife teaches. She's a university professor and she has tenure, so we are here, and I could not just go to California, but I was extraordinarily flattered. I remain open to consulting design work. I would love to do something for a really good company. I would love to be able to say, this is what it should be and this is how it should be built, but I don't have to personally bankroll this because it would possibly bankrupt me, because everything released, you could release the world's best anything and have it not take off in the market for whatever reason. Imagine if I was ready to roll out the Excalibur, and I had taken out a $60,000 loan to get all the balls rolling, and everything was like, all right, within 90 days I shall be able to do X, and then 3 months in we should have the first units available for sale and have to pay all these factories and order all these parts and everything. And I owed the bank this money, and in X predictable amount of time I'd have to start paying it back. And if that's when COVID had hit and I could not get transformers anymore, and I could not get parts anymore, and I could not get tubes, and the factory that was making this was temporarily closed, but the bank would still want their money, I would have lost everything. And that's an extreme example, but very unfortunately relevant, because of what COVID has done to the industry and to everything. So I'd be very comfortable designing something good at almost any price point, as long as I didn't have to risk my particular shirt on it, I'd much rather say this is a safe bet and will give you great results and should sound great. And if it gets brought to market, people will want it. Hopefully they'll want it a lot. That's the thing you go into. But I would not be like, oh yeah, well, we can't do that because that costs $3 and we can only spend $1.20 on that. So I'm like, I'm out. You don't give a fuck. I want to build something that someone will love, and you just want to make a profit, and there are better ways to do that. Oh my God, Ben's late. Ben, how could you? How could you be late? Ian Miller, a preferred speaker for the Princeton 65 reissue, is same as earlier in the chat. Princeton's is a great choice. Go back and look at the chat because we spent about five minutes on that subject earlier. Hey, Matt, you didn't have to donate. You're always welcome to contribute. I appreciate you answering the questions I'm not able to get to. You and Brad, other qualified people. This is not the Lyle show. I don't view this as I am the source of everything good. For whatever reason, the algorithm has favored me, and people come here, and I like the fact that hey, I see the same 20, 30 people on here a lot, and some of you I've gotten to know a bit over the years. And, you and Brad and a few others, if you got answers, give them. This is not me being the guru. I am no kind of guru. I don't even like mountains. But, if I disagree with you, I will tell you. And if you disagree with me, you tell me. But so far, we're saying the same thing with different words. Happy Memorial Day weekend to you too. We are great. Hope you and yours are. See you, Auden. Let's see. Hey, love to rock. Thanks, Ben. Appreciate that. Jatuka says, do you usually repair Hammond organ electronics or tube Leslie amps? Usually no, because there aren't that... Sorry, I just whistled. Usually no, because I did it again. I'm going to avoid that word. Watch this. Usually, that's an old trick, the pencil trick usually, for blocking S's. Quick, funny thing. You notice how if I say usually without anything, it can whistle. If I put a pencil or my finger over the mic, the S gets broken up and it won't the same way. That's an old engineer's trick. It's funny to me listening to the first two Beatles records in particularly. They were so used to singing live at Hamburg and the Cavern and places with really crappy mics that they did two things. They avoided the S in their lyrics as much as possible. And when they did hit an S on those first two records, they always pronounced it as a sh, because a sh doesn't do the same thing as s. So, when I see that something, I mean, almost every S on those records is shh, and that is the sign of a pro who came up in the trenches. All right, speaking of let me answer the Hammond question. Sorry, I got diverted there. Yeah, I don't usually because there aren't that many that need service. The ones in town that I know of belong to studios, and I have serviced those, but once they're serviced, they don't need service again for many, many years. So I have done the Hammond amps and preamps, and I have done some Leslie amps, and I've even done some Leslie engine motor repair and oiling and all that stuff. I don't do, and I've done Rhodes and Wurlitzer electronics, but I don't do the hammers and tunings and things on those. I'm not qualified to adjust a mechanical action of a keyboard or to adjust reeds or all that stuff. That is a vanishing art. It's like a friend has brought me an Echoplex to fix. And I know theoretically how to do that, but I'm not set up. I don't have the gear set up to demagnetize and to clean all the heads and set azimuths and tension and retention and clean this and replace the rollers and make sure everything's perfect. So I'm going to send that to someone who still does that professionally. Though, the Echoplexes, Studer tape machines, to a large degree, what happens inside a Hammond, those are specialized things which are kind of dying off. And I came up late enough that, I was not trained on how to align tape heads on a Studer. I have fixed some motors in some Studers and other tape machines, but I've not effed with the heads. And I know enough about it to know that I am not qualified to do that at a professional level. And some studios, 2-inch 24 track is not where I need to learn. Anyway, it has been another hour. We're going to take another 7-minute break, and I will try to get through. The rest of the questions. So if we could maybe stop asking questions for a little bit. I'll try to work through the questions which already have been asked. I mean, feel free to talk to each other real fast. John Williamson, cryogenics is BS. And Bryson, I would start with valvewizard.co.uk. He's got a lot of online stuff there. And then I would order his books. That's Merlin Blenko's. And then I would get the Radiotron Designer's Handbook Volume 4. You can put that into Google, and you'll find that online in the PDF version for free. Read it. Then there's the Jack Darr book, whose name escapes me, but if you do Jack Darr book, D-A-R-R, Jack Darr book tube design, it'll come up. Pretty sure that's online for free in PDF form, or you can get on paperback or whatever. And the Kevin O'Connor series, Ultimate Tone series, is quite good. I think there are a couple of things in there that maybe he's corrected in later editions. I've not seen a couple small mistakes, but overall good information. I think TUT 3 would be a good place to start. And on that note, we're going to take another 7-minute intermission. Let's see if my shortcut works. Be back in a little bit. It says, see, my shortcut works. Jackson, $200. 61 Reverber Rocket, a combination never before heard on this planet. All right, that's some hard edge pickups in that thing, but they sound great for what their intended purpose. So, all right, sorry about the delayed exit of the intermission. I have the mouse focus over here on the right to the iPad where I've got the chat window, and for my hotkeys to work, apparently I've got to bring the focus back to my laptop to do that. So I'm still ironing out how to do this smoothly. You know, most channels, when you see this kind of thing, there's a guy sitting here, the talking head, the woman, whoever, and there's someone off to the side producing this stuff. So they pop up the questions and they handle all that stuff. And I'm trying to wear all the hats without actually obscuring my lovely hair. Let's see. There was a question there that I wanted to answer. And it scrolled up when I was doing the hey, Tree of Life, thank you very much for that. That's very appreciated. Where was the question? It scrolled automatically because I hit Control R to resume the regular stream out of intermission, and as a result, it went down. Oh, it went back to top chat. That's why I'm not seeing it. Damn it. I'm not sure why it even gives me top chat as an option. I don't care about top chat. I want to see what everyone says. So let's see. Almost back. There's so many questions. I'm going to try to get through as many as I can. All right. Apparently, I've lost some. It was a question about Fromel mods and the Blues Deluxe or Hot Rod DeVille or Hot Rod Deluxe. Whether the Fromel is the only solution to the problems. The Fromel fixes none of the problems in the Hot Rod or Blues series. It just introduces new points of failure by jamming overly large orange drops where they don't fit, where the lead diameter is too big for the holes in the board, and does not do anything about the major issues with those amps, which are bad solder joints on the pots, the low voltage supply overheating and burning the board, and changing the filter caps. And you can see like dozens of examples on my channel of me fixing those things, and none of which involve a Fromel kit. And you're not going to hear any difference in sound if you change out, say, a 100 nanofarad stock cap to 100 nanofarad orange drop, except the orange drop is physically too large. The leads don't fit in the board space unless you bend them over. Then it's touching other things, and it's too much mass, and so people put hot glue in there, and the lead is too thick to fit through the hole, so they ram it through, and it just destroys the pad. Fromel is, at best, attempting to fix a problem that does not exist while creating new severe problems and ignoring the actual problems of this stock amp. So, no, I cannot recommend them at all. So anyway, let me get back to the chat that I can see and try to get through some of the questions. And if I've missed any donation questions, I do apologize. I have no control over this. It won't let me scroll up any farther. The most recent one I see is Texas Toast Guitars. This is a great channel for building electric guitars. Nick Romy, any tips on books, resources for intermediate repair troubleshooting? 90% of the troubleshooting that I do comes down to two things. Viewing any amplifier as typically a series of triodes. So let's take a Fender AB763. Well, it's a string of triodes. Let's just look at the normal channel. It comes into V1A, that's the first triode. and then it goes out to the tone stack and the volume pot, and then goes to V1B, which is the second triode. The output of V1B goes out to the mixing resistors, which then feeds the phase inverter, which are two triodes chained together to operate the same waveform pretty much on both outputs with different polarity. So that's the simplest way of looking at what's happening in the normal channel of an AB763 Fender. Well, if I have noise or I don't have signal, I can do one of two things. I can say, all right, well, let me measure all the voltages in the triodes. Hey, this one's got 400 volts on the plate and it's got no volts on the cathode. The other triode on that tube has got 220 volts on the plate and 2 volts on the triode. So that tells me the second triode is operating. The first triode has no cathode voltage. That means it's not conducting. It either doesn't have a heater connection for that side of the triode, the tube itself is bad, or there is a fault in the cathode resistor. That's pretty easy to find out. The other thing you can do is saying, hey, I've got a hum. Well, let me mute grids going back. Hey, in this case, the hum disappears if I mute V1B, but it doesn't disappear if I mute V1A. So the problem is somewhere in V1B, or it mutes if I hit V1B, but then it mutes again if I do V1A. Well, V1A is the first triode in that series. It's either the input stuff or something's wrong in the wiring for V1A, or it's a bad tube. So you've isolated it down to which triode is a problem based on when the hum disappears. The next question, which is almost everything from that point, is what conditions does a triode need to operate? Are those conditions being met? Pardon me, I got the hiccups again. Later you expand that into what conditions does a pentode need to operate? That's almost everything in a tube amp. What conditions do I need to have for operation? Are those conditions met? And whether it's a champ with 2 gain stages, so 2 triodes, if it's a Mesa Boogie with 47 triodes, it's that same question again and again and again. Do I have the voltages I should have? Is there hum being introduced here? Are the conditions being met? It all boils down to that. Everything that I do. Occasionally I'll get some weird thing, but not very often. And usually that weird thing is just when a condition needs to be met that I was previously either unaware of or unaware of the significance of it given some other condition elsewhere in the app. You know, it gets complicated, but that's the basic thing most people just don't know how to do. What are the conditions it needs to operate? Are they being met? Sorry to be repetitive, but people learn through repetition. Why not publish a suggested reading list in the video? I'm not really a publisher. You know, I put this information in, I think, just about every live stream. People need to write it down. You know, I'm sorry. I'm by nature contrarian and anti-authoritarian and anti-disestablishmentarian. So when someone says you ought to do this, I'm like hell I will. So I also think that I give an awful lot of free information, and if people want to write it down, that would be good of them rather than asking me to repeat it all the time, because it gets my back up, and I'm not a perfect person. Thanks, Nick Romy. Travis McCartney, Fender Deluxe reverb reissue that has reverb that cuts out when turned up past 8, turning back down fixes it. I imagine what's happening now is not going to be the tank. I swapped a new mod one and it still cuts out, but a Ruby tank for my Princeton works. I don't think the tank, I think, is a red herring there. I think what's probably happening on your Deluxe reverb reissue is that the shared cathode on V4, so V4A and B share a cathode. I bet your I bet dollars to donuts that your electrolytic cap there is bad, the cathode bypass cap. If that cap is bad or is bad at certain frequencies, you will have terrible oscillation in that tube, and that oscillation may be audible or it may just cause cutoff. And I bet you're getting enough oscillation that it just goes to cutoff. You're not going to hear that reverb. So that's the most likely cause. The tank should not matter when the reverb is turned up because the tank is not something that's in that signal. The other thing it could be, and this is where the tank may come in, is you probably have a combination of a faulty cathode bypass cap and it's oscillating at a very high frequency. And the Deluxe reverb issue, I don't believe, has that 2 nanofarad, 2000 picofarad cap across the reverb return like some later ones, 70s ones do. I bet either replacing that cap or adding, the bypass cap, or adding a 2 nanofarad cap across the reverb return to ground would fix that problem. I think the 2 nanofarad is a band-aid. Changing that cathode capacitor is the actual fix. It sounds like you just have oscillation between those two stages because that cap is failing, or that cap is failing only at certain frequencies, and that can happen with electrolytic caps. The Ruby tank and the MOD tank should have this almost exactly the same output impedance if they're the correct tank for that circuit. Remember that in a reverb tank, the output impedance is not the same thing as the output DCR. So the resistance you measure is not what the output impedance is. And if I were to explain that, we'd be here 3 weeks. So, Matt Fields, the slight microphonics of ceramic disc caps can be wonderful. I don't have any thoughts on the 6v6 Bruno AC30 Gam Jam, other than I had one Bruno, I don't remember which model it was. It was a whole lot of It was built pretty much the same way as the Custom Classic, but I didn't like the sounds. And it could be a bad reverb pot, but that doesn't make sense for it to change when a tank is changed out. But different tank impedances it's not going to be the same impedance at all frequencies. So it's possible that the transducer in the Ruby tank behaves differently at X frequency, even though I guess it gets into impedance. It could be a slight variation, but you should not hear any difference between 3 suitable tanks, regardless of the volume, unless there's something wrong with that stage not being stable. Yeah, Mad Max, I'd love to talk about the vacation. I just don't want to bore people with, here's my pictures from the Grand Canyon. Matt, again, 335s, redoing the harness is something I want to do once. I have a good friend and customer who had me rewire his 335. He went from the stock Memphis historic spec MHS pickups to some Lawler Imperial low winds, and I thought it sounded awesome. But after a week and a half, he decided they weren't for him. He wanted to put the MHS back, so the entire thing had to come back out again. And it's a good thing I love that guy, because otherwise, my God, I would have charged twice as much to do it the second time. DCR is reliable enough, PAF to PAF or strat to strat, Matt, but too many people on the forums just see DCR in isolation as like some magic figure. Yeah, Victor, I'm looking forward to hearing the low output ones. The Mule was interesting to me. These are the low output ones. I don't remember what they're called right now. Stormy Mondays. And Paul Stafford Cook has a Stormy Monday in the neck of his telly, and I liked it a lot, so I thought I'd give it a shot. Maybe changing those pickups will make me play like Paul Stafford Cook. If you guys don't know Paul, look up his channel, Paul Stafford Cook. I just get a kick out of his playing and how much he enjoys it, because there's so many YouTube channels where they're jaded or they're showing off licks, or they're a bit egotistical. And he's just still having fun with it, and I really admire that. There's a guy, Uncle Ben. I don't remember his real name. Ben. He specializes in metal stuff and Van Halen stuff, and it's not really my bag, but I've checked out Ben Eller, Eller, I believe. But I enjoy his approach to things because he does not take himself very seriously. And he's a really proficient player, but he doesn't put it in your face as, hey, check out how badass I am. I've seen some guys who are like that, and no thank you. But he really shows you the good stuff, and he shows you really tricky bits, and he even shows you, hey, I still haven't gotten this down. Here's how I'm getting it. I'm making progress, and this is my exercise. So I admire his overall approach to things. And he still has fun, but he's not putting himself out there as being Mr. Accomplished, even though he very much is. So, I don't have any experience with Todd Sharp's amps. Thanks, Alan. I appreciate it, though. Yeah, Throwback is crazy expensive, but again, Matt, small production. The cost, it's not all profit. The cost of doing that and expanding and having employees and distribution, it's a lot more than people think, and the world is getting it more expensive every day. Charlie Plate, you're talking about the XL 500L? Are you talking about the Bill Lawrence's? Man, those are all over the map. Those are just all over the map. Thanks, Tree Life. Appreciate that. Origin 50 head, yeah, I've got a video on it. Avoid. It's poorly built. The Origin 50, the Origin 20, and the Studio Vintage 20. Pretty much junk. Sorry. Good on you, Joy Buzzer. And thank you, JC Rocket. Jerry F., that is not my area of expertise. So I limit myself to amplifiers and coffees and cuisine. Let's see. Nola Rocks has a big question. Do UK-made amps really sound better, different, at the voltages they were originally designed for compared to US wall voltages? Well, yeah, they do. I'm trying to decide how far down this rabbit hole to go. It's not all of them. I don't think you're going to hear any difference in a modern amp, 50 versus 60 hertz. Because it's also going to, it's not going to just be that. It's going to be 50 hertz with 240 versus 60 hertz with 120 with a modern amp. One of the things that makes old Voxes frustrating is that when JMI spec'd out the 110 volt tap on the power transformer primary, they forgot that America has 60 hertz. So they're 110 volt. There's 110 volts at 50 hertz. You hit that with 110 or 120 today, 60 hertz, that transformer is going to be running too hot. So a lot of times you've got to trick it and make it work right. There's a lot of details as far as heat that I don't want to get into right now. But in general, an amp where the transformer primary really is spec for 60 hertz 110 versus 50 hertz 240, it's all taken care of in the windings. But occasionally, this Wodens and stuff that JMI used, you've got to say, well, it's 110 if it were 50 hertz, but at 60 hertz we need to go down to 104 or whatever, And I imagine there are probably some 60s Marshalls that have a similar thing, though in Memphis there are fewer 60s Marshalls. We mostly get 70s and later, because by the time Marshall secured U.S. distribution, it was early 70s for most parts of America. Unless you lived in L.A. or New York, you weren't getting Marshalls much before 71, 72. I might be having a 68 come in soon. I hope so. I'd like to get into that. Matt Fields, I'm not naming the names. Joy Buzzer did a Hoffman Blues Junior conversion. Doug Hoffman does good kits. Doug knows his shit. He has a really good company and offers good products. And when I do custom amps, I usually have him make my boards because he's got the CNC all set up to do it precisely. And it takes him a lot less time to do a turret board than it takes me to do, because that's what he's set up to do. When you set up to do something 1,000 times, it's much faster, it's usually better, and it costs less than doing it once or twice. I'm always glad to outsource this stuff like that, as long as the result is high quality. You see that, Matt Fields, that's the thing. The internal voltages are not going to be similar if it's rated at 110 at 50 hertz, but it's getting 60 hertz. You'd think it would, and it's supposed to, but there's some goofs on 50s and 60s amplifiers with that in that regard, and that can be part of the joy. There's also the joy of, say, an AC30 has a 230 and a 240 tap on it, I think. And so if you're running in England with 50 hertz, you may use the 240. If you're in the U.S. with 60 hertz, you may prefer. It's probably going to be better to set it to the 230 or set your very active 230 and the amp to 240. I'd have to look at my notes. I've got it written down somewhere. It gets really confusing. And the thing is, I'm terrible at remembering numbers and strings of letters like AC30, 12AX7, Marshall 1959. All these things I've got to remember. And I'm terrible at that. I can remember entire Shakespeare soliloquies much more than I can remember 7591 A's in that MPEG. It took me like 10 minutes to remember what the name was the other day in the video. I guess the other day, it was yesterday. Celestion Blues are great sounding in a Deluxe Reverb. The issue is it's on the border of not being safe. The Deluxe Reverb is nominally a 22 watt amp that's measured at the onset of clipping, which means that it can actually put out about 30 watts on peaks. And a Celestion Blue is nominally a 15 watt speaker. It can usually handle about 20 watts. So for the guys that are always running their Deluxe Reverbs clean, or just clean on the edge of breakup, which is a lot of guys, you can make the Blue last a good long while and it will sound good. But if you're always cranking that Deluxe, or you just crank it one day for like several hours, you're probably going to kill that speaker. And the sad thing about that is the 50 watt version, the Gold, doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound like the 20 watt Blue. Weber has a 30 watt version of the Blue Dog, which might be a better choice, but I've had the 30 watt die in Deluxe Reverbs. I think that's more on Weber. Since Ted passed, their quality's not been as good in my experience. And I think we went with a Weber 50 watt version in that Deluxe Reverb, and it has lasted, but it never quite sounded as alive. I think it's just not as sensitive as the lower wattage one. But the vintage, not the vintage 30, the vintage 30 is another good choice for a Deluxe Reverb, but a Deluxe Reverb into Celestion Blue, when it's not being, the speaker's not being taxed too much, is a fantastic sound. Remember when you see Brian May pushing the hell out of his AC30s, he's got a huge box of spare Celestion Blues on the road with him, because he blows speakers. You know, back when he was touring all the time, he would blow speakers almost every night. His tech would pop in a different speaker, and then all the speakers at the end of the tour go get reconed. But he was using them as a disposable, replaceable economy, so to speak. He knew that he was going to be killing his speakers to get a sound. So you've got to be willing to take that chance if you want certain tones. Thanks, Ike Stoddard. Love my brain dumps. Well, if you have to, I'm not going to finish that thought. Hard to find a good mellotron mechanic. Yeah, I mean, you got to find someone who is a trained 60s and 70s studio tape op and engineer to really maintain stuff like that. And I know enough about it to know that I don't need to mess it up. DJ says, I've replaced the output tubes in my 67 Super Reverb with a non-matched set of JJ6L6 GCs. about 4 years ago. What idle current should I set? Oh, I don't know. Idle current is not a how you bias tubes. You have to know the performance. You have to know the plate voltage. If I say 35 milliamps, that's meaningless. Maybe 32, maybe 37, maybe 40. Let me call up something real quick. Let's see here. Let's see, where's my thingy? There's probably a way to share this on the screen. I'm not sure if I can here. I mean, I know I can, but I'm not sure if I can do it fast. All right, so I've got the biasing, my bias stuff here for Marshall. Not a Marshall, this is a Friedman. This is that Friedman from the other day. So 25 watt tubes. The DCR on one tube, on one side of the output transformer was 37.1. The DCR on the other was 41.2. Had plate voltage of 460 volts DC. The bias supply was negative 41 volts with the mains at 120 volts. And I biased them so that the first tube was drawing had a voltage drop of 1.25. And the second one had a voltage drop of 1.3. That put the tubes at 62% and 58.1% idle. And the first tube was drawing 33.7 milliamps, and the second one was drawing 31.6 milliamps. So that is, average of 32 milliamps. Dave had said that he biases those at about 35 milliamps, and plate voltage is about 460. And that's as precise as he was, because that's really as precise as he needed to be. And I chose not to bias it at 35 milliamps, which would have been right about 70% dissipation, because Memphis wall voltages change, and I had them at right about 60% with the wall voltage at 120 volts coming out of the wall. Well, I know that wall voltage later in summer, most Memphis is going to be 127 volts. And if I had biased it at 70, they would have exceeded that, and the tubes would have lasted a short while, and things would have run really hot. So I biased it to where it's going to sound really good, and given that the preamp has got JCM 800 levels of gain, I didn't think we needed to buy more output in the output tubes. That was my call. I might have gone as high as 65%. Now, if you have a client who either lives in a place where the wall voltage is always consistent, or if they have a Variac or other power conditioner so that I can say, hey, this will always be at 120 volts, then I might say, all right, let's push them up to 70% if you want that, if you like that sound. But for the average person who does not know anything about these things, who does not want to buy a Variac, does not want to buy a brown box, does not want to think about such things, and does not even know when the wall voltage spikes up to 130 volts. If I just bias it at 35 milliamps, and then in August it blows a tube because, hey, he was using it with the wall voltage at 128 for 3 hours, and the tubes were actually biased about 90%, he's going to think I did something wrong. So there's a certain amount of cover your ass, and there's a certain amount of protecting his investment. But what I don't think about what current, I think about what the actual percentage is. What is the plate current as a percentage of the tube's maximum plate current? So 62% for the first tube there, that tube was putting out 15.5 watts. It's a 25 watt tube. And I can do that measurement, and that 15.5 watts with that 1.25 drop across a 37.1 DC resistance is 33.7 milliamps. So the milliamps is an incidental measurement that I have. It's not prescriptive. I'm not setting, oh, it's a Marshall, I need to have 35 milliamps. Oh, it's a Fender, I need to have 40 milliamps. I need to have 32 milliamps, whatever. Sorry to go off on a tangent. So If you want to know more about biasing, Randall Aiken, Aikaen, so Aiken Amps, I believe, has some really wonderful articles on biasing and why 70% is not always your friend, et cetera, et cetera. And also why crossover distortion is practically meaningless because it changes with the frequency that you measure. And I showed that a little bit in that Friedman video the other day. Audacity, yeah, Colby. Audacity is the name of the PC DAW. I forgot the name of it. Yeah. The past says, "Hi Lyle, I had my amp service and they added a capacitor in parallel next to an F&T, but left some silicone around the metal lead on one side. Is this cause for concern?" Well, I'm not sure why you would need to put a cap in parallel. Is it next to an F&T cap? I mean, in parallel with or just next to? Anyway, if your question is if there's silicone around the metal lead, silicone is non-conductive. Not a problem if there's a little bit of silicone on your on the lead of a capacitor on either side. So not a problem. Matt, yeah, it's not about 50, 60 hertz in a power supply. It's whether the amp was designed for that. You know, when you design a tap for 110, 120 volts, you have to know if it's going to be 50 or 60 hertz. And if you don't have that factor then correctly, then your 110 primary is not a 110 primary, and it can be a big issue as far as the heat. But this is typically in older transformers, and this is esoteric stuff. I'm not going to get into Bonamassa. AC/DC had Australian amps, and he wanted to you know, they travel the world with their Australian amps, so there's nothing wrong with the concept there. I don't know whether Bonamassa is on to anything with American, if he's still running his American amps, but you know, if he likes the sound, he's willing to pay the guy to set it up, that's fine. Let's see. Are we meant to hear something right now? I don't know when you said that, Dustin. So, I'm trying to get caught up on the speakers, on the questions. I don't think I'm going to be able to. I'm way, way behind in the chat, and we're coming up on the 3rd hour. So I'm going to try to catch up with some of the questions, and then we're going to end it at about 4, which is about 30 minutes longer than we usually do. And I'm sorry I'll always be behind in the chat. It's because I yak too much. But I think the world's too full of quick sound bites that don't give you any real information. So I'd rather have 20 people really get their question answered than 200 people get their name said on YouTube and then blah, blah, blah. Next. Colby Jack, thanks for that very much, man. I don't have any thoughts on point-to-point amps by Mike Skaggs. I've heard some nice things about him, but I have no experience with his amps. Thanks, Lollygagger. That's very nice. Sean, FX Sean, Lollygagger FX Sean. Thanks very much. I'm going to... Well, thanks, Charlie Play. I mean, I know that my videos are useful to techs. I just want people to remember that I don't do this to say, let me teach techs how to tech. I'm trying to show guitarists, for the most part, what their techs are actually doing, what the techs are dealing with, some things that guitarists may not be aware of, and things that a lot of stuff that is real obvious to techs as far as making an amp sound better or last longer that no one tells guitarists. And so I try to communicate as much as possible in less technical terms in ways that musicians can understand and apply to the real world. I'm reading stuff, so I'm not making eye contact with you guys, but and I'm not saying that I'm not using technical stuff so that guitarists can understand it, because guitarists are stupid. I am a guitarist, but it's a different vocabulary, and not all techs I know understand advanced theory and what upper extensions are. I mean, we all have different vocabularies. So I try to put things in real world terms. It's very hard to say. Real world terms with examples as much as possible. Shall I compare thee to a brown-faced Deluxe Reverb? Thou art more temperate and less tweedy. Let's see. I'm getting people replying to things I said not too long ago, so I'm almost... Okay, I think I'm towards the end here. All right, cool. All right. Is there a Variac you would recommend, Richard asked. Matt's absolutely right. Try to get an older one. But if you really just want to get one, the not Ally Express, the Parts Express ones, I think they got a 5 amp one for like $60 and a 10 amp one for like $100, are okay. Know that you will still not be able to trust the meter on them inherently, and that the knob is rarely installed right. So the first thing you need to do is get one and set it to 120 volts, and then hook your meter up and say, oh, all right, let me turn this until it actually is 120 volts, and then take the knob off, and then move the knob, and then put it back on so that the line lines up with 120 when you get 120 out. But just know with any Variac that 120 or that 80 or that 90 or that 130, whatever you set it to, is in relation to the wall voltage. So if the wall voltage is not 120 coming in, you're not going to get, and you want it to be 90 volts coming out, you won't have 90 volts coming out if the 120 is not coming in. If it goes to 127, you're going to have 100 volts coming out. If you have it 110 coming in, you're going to have 80 coming out. So that 90 is in relation to a theoretical 120. So you always have to use a meter in front or behind to know which results you're actually getting. But the Parts Express ones that I've gotten for clients for the price have been quite good once you calibrate them, and they have to learn to use a meter. Now that can be a cheap voltmeter, $20 from Home Depot. It just needs to read AC, and they need to know not to touch it with their fingers. Hey, thanks, Colby Jack. Yeah, if everyone could give this a like. I see videos on how to grow your channel, and they're like, always say, hey, be sure to hit that like and subscribe right down there, and do this, and don't forget to hit the bell, and do it in every video, man. You want to put it in every video so that people will do it. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to talk like that to you guys. I don't want to talk about liking and subscribing. I don't want to fucking talk about Nord blah blah VPN or Squarespace or any other. I mean, every other channel's got that. And I don't have ads every 4 minutes like a lot of channels. I have the ad at the beginning. Sometimes there's an ad at the end. It's always the skipping 4, 3, 2, 1. It's just necessary evil. Otherwise, they don't tell people that I have videos. So like and subscribe. I appreciate that. I do put the please like and subscribe graphic once in every video at the 30-second point, and it's not up there very long. I try to be a gentle reminder. It's hard. I used to do for a long time, at the end of each video was a suggested video to watch next. And I look back, and like less than a percentage of people ever clicked that. So it was just more time for me to spend creating a video for a link that very few people clicked on. B, if you didn't click on it, the video that YouTube would autoplay was never that video. It's always something else off and on some other channel. I tried doing that video up there for 5 seconds, make people, oh, I better click it real fast before it goes. And I tried putting it up there for 30 seconds so people have lots of time, and no one clicks on them. So I gave up on that. Lots of stuff I should be doing to grow the channel, and I just can't be that guy. But if I need to be that guy, I got the voice. Anyway, that's enough of all that. But yeah, liking and subscribing really does help me. It's amazing how many thousands of views a video might get to have 47 likes. I think views matter more than likes in the algorithm, but it sure helps a lot. It doesn't cost you anything. And I want to say something very much to everyone here in the live chat with me right now. The live chat, as far as the live portion, is only open to subscribers. So I know that everyone here subscribes, and I do appreciate that very much. And everyone else who sees this video after it's gone live, who is not a subscriber, consider it, because that's the only way you're going to get to ask me these questions in real time. And it's while I appreciate the donations that people have made in this, you do not have to donate to get your questions answered. I try to answer every question that I can. I'm not here to, it's not like, that's a really nice question there. It'd be nice if it got answered. Anyway, you guys have a wonderful week. I've got a lot of amps to get through. And I'm going to try to do a real playing video of this Ampeg, because it really does sound good, and the lav mic just doesn't do any justice. So we're going to try to end this now, and I'll see you guys soon. And fuck. See, I was talking earlier about how I need a producer. I forgot that I had the focus on the iPad. I'll try this again. You guys have a great week, and I'll see you soon.